Mel, do you want to get started now?
Yes, I think it's good timings. All right, awesome. Thank you everyone for joining. Hey everyone, welcome to part two of our Copilot series. My name is Melissa Lee Young. I'm head of marketing at Generation E. And last week we covered the basics of unlocking Copilot, how to get started, what it can do, and some quick wins to boost your day-to-day productivity. So today we're going to get hands-on with Copilot agents. So AI helpers that help automate tasks, connect processes, and give you back time. We're going to keep it practical, what they are, where they help, and how to get started, whether you're in the business, in IT, or using the tools day to day. We're also going to touch on Copilot Studio, the low-code way to build your own agents without being a developer, so you can tailor this to your own world. You'll see real examples in Teams, Outlook, and SharePoint, plus a few do's and don'ts. By the end, you'll know the next steps to try and what to watch out for around adoption and governance. And so, quick introductions before we dive in. Today we have Rosemary Shaker, our Head of Digital Employee Experience at Generation E. Rosemary helps people embrace new ways of working, blending change, security, and practical training so that tools like Microsoft 365 and Copilot actually connect with your teams. We also have Ben Teo, who's our Senior Change Manager at Generation E. Ben turns complex technology into something useful and human. He's all about making adoption easy and delivering real value for your teams across all sectors. Now, we love lots of questions, so please post any questions you have in the Q&A chat box. And we'll also be recording this session and I will share the details after this session. All right, so let's get started. Rosemary, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Mel. So welcome everyone. We are thrilled that whether this is your second session with us or your first session, that you're here to learn more about Copilot agents. So last week we talked quite a lot about the hands-on practicalities of using Microsoft 365 Copilot, but today we are going to focus on our Copilot agents. We are going to look at our agents from a no-code and a low-code perspective. We won't be diving into our pro-code agents in this session. In an hour, we don't really have enough time to go through our pro code sessions. So we hope that you enjoy this really practical hands-on experience with our agents. Ben has a fantastic demonstration to provide you as we go through this session, but let's dive in. So why would we build agents, I guess, is kind of that first starting point. So last week when we talked about Copilot, we talked about it being your personal assistant and helping you draft emails, summarize meetings, boost your productivity. But why would we build an agent? So our Microsoft 365 Copilot does provide us with that really powerful AI-driven assistance. But Copilot alone might not fully address all of your organizational unique workflows, your data sources, or any automations that you may need. So that's why we look at building agents. So agents can help us extend our Copilot's knowledge by integrating third-party systems and data sources. So it allows us to break out of that 365 boundary and use the other tools. We have lots of organizations that we work with who use platforms like ServiceNow and Jira, Confluence, that really need that information to be able to create those complete answers when they're using Copilot. It can also help us automate complex and multi-step workflows. So whether that's across the 365 suite or again with some of those external applications. And it can also help tailor those user experience as well. So we can create our agents and have that tailored experience embedded into our Teams chats, into our Outlook, into our SharePoints. So again, our users can stay in the flow of their work, but creating with this more specific use of Copilot in the agents that we create. Now, we do have a really large or a spectrum of agent types and what our agents can do for us. So you'll see here, I've got a bit of a range of what our agents can do. So they're not all created equal. We can design them the way in which we want to create them. So here we have some of our simple agents. So our simple retrieval agents, they will fetch information for us. They'll summarize data, answer questions, similar to what you have now with when you're using Copilot Chat. But with our retrieval agents, we can ground our data in a really specific source of that data. So it might be we only want to focus on a particular SharePoint site or particular policies, things, or a particular project. So we can create those really simple retrieval agents. Then we have our task-orientated agents. So these agents go a step further. So this is where we can start automating some of those repetitive workflows. We can get our agents to take actions when we prompt them to do it. So now they're really starting to work in the workflows that we're working in. And then we have our more advanced agents, which are our autonomous agents. So these can operate independently. They can plan dynamically. They can orchestrate with other agents as well, and even escalate issues when they're needed. So with Copilot Studio, we've got the tools and we can configure these agents right across this spectrum of agents for us. However, so that's what our agents can do, but we have a range of different tools that we can use to create these agents. So this is a spectrum of tools that we've got available to us across the system, and they're designed really to work with you at the level that you're at and the level that your organization is at, from our simple agents here, our no-code agents for our end users, right up to our pro code agents for our developers. And this way it helps you kind of maximize who is creating and what type of agents that they're going to create for you. So and the complexity changes with each of these as well. So we have our for our end users, we have our what is now called, as of this morning, our Copilot Studio Lite agents. They were formerly known as Agent Builder yesterday. These are really fantastic agents to introduce your end users to. So for those that joined us last week, we kind of talked about that, the pyramid of adoption, where we looked at personal productivity to begin with, and then moving on to departmental and organizational benefits that we get from our tools. And these Copilot Studio Lite agents are really fantastic for introducing your staff to the concept of agents, for getting an understanding of how to write instructions for your agents, because that is a whole new skill set in itself. They are easier to refine those instructions as you start testing and working with them, building up that skill set of your end users to understand the capability of the agent tools. And they sit within the platforms that people use every day. You don't need a special license. You don't need to go into another platform. You can use the chat tool to create those. Ben, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, fantastic. It's my favorite way to create agents for beginners. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we have our Copilot Studio Full. Its new title from this morning as well. Most of you may know that just as Copilot Studio. That is our web-based platform for building our more complex agents. They are still classified as low code. However, it does you do benefit if you've got a background in Power Platform to understand how some of these agents are actually created, and particularly if you're starting to get a little bit more complex with the task orientation of what you want your agents to do. But they are fantastic tools to be able to extend the use of your Copilot. And then we've got our developer platform. So this sits across Visual Studio Code, Copilot Studio, and the AI Azure Foundry platforms. Here we can really create custom agents here, and we can change quite a lot of things, but there are more governance requirements and more skill required as we get into this into the pro code options here. So now, if I've just confused everyone, I've got a simple little flow chart here to decide on, well, do I use Copilot Studio Lite or do I use Copilot Studio Full? What are you talking about now? Why are there more than one tool that we need to look at? So here, this is a bit of guidance on how you choose the tool that's going to work best for you. So we would choose the Lite version, or in yesterday's speak, Agent Builder here. If we want to quickly create an agent for ourselves or for a small team, We want to use natural language and existing content. So we want to create an agent that will use a SharePoint site, for example, to answer Teams questions, or you want to base it off your emails. This light version is really simple and accessible. It's integrated in with Copilot 365 experience, so you can build those agents without without needing to have any code. You can really talk to the experience there. Then we have, if we're going to come down and look at our full experience. So here you want to think about this. You'd use the full experience if you, one, need to target a broader audience. So say you're looking at an agent that will support a whole department, your organization, or particularly if it's going external to your organization, you would absolutely want to use the full version for that. If your agent requires advanced capabilities, so it's a multi-step workflow that you're looking for, you want to have some custom integrations. So you want to be able to have integrations with another platform. If you want more control over the deployment and management of your agent, you would look at the full experience there as well. So this really then allows you to create those bigger agents. For those, you would use that full experience. So hopefully that gives you some guidance about which sort of agents that you should choose from that light experience or this full experience. And in Ben's demonstration that he's going to run through, he'll talk kind of through the process as well about how we can build up, how we can start experimenting in this light version and then move it through to a more to the fuller version as well. I just thought for all our technical people on the call as well, for all the non-technical people, this might be a bit of a crazy chart here, but this is how our agents actually work from a high-level architecture perspective. So we have our user experience up here. Now I have put optional here because if you're creating an autonomous agent, potentially it won't have a user interaction, it will just run. Then we have our orchestration. So our orchestration, if you think of it as kind of the brains behind the scenes that decides what your agent should do when a user asks it a question. So if someone starts interacting with your agent and says, what's the leave policy? The orchestration will then understand what that request is, and it'll use its natural language processing for that. It'll then start to choose the right knowledge sources that it needs to ground the response in. It'll look at the skills or the actions or triggers that it needs to use to be able to answer that question, and then it will action that response back. And we do have our foundational models here. So at the moment, all of our agents that we build within Copilot Studio will use the Copilot foundational model, which at the moment is GPT-4, moving over to GPT-5. For our Pro Code developers here, you can change that foundational model if your agent requires it when you go into the Azure Foundry. Microsoft also have now just announced that they will extend the foundational models natively in Copilot as well. So you'll start to see a broader choice there of those foundational models, but you won't need to choose that as you build them in Studio. It'll pick the best foundational model for you. And as we get to our more complex agents, within our skills, we can now have sub-agents within a larger agent as well. So I like to think of it as you're building a mega agent, and then you've got smaller components within that mega agent. It is good for ensuring that Copilot is handing off to a more specific agent to give an answer to your end user. It's not trying to reason over a huge amount of data or trying to understand all of the instructions. And also from a management perspective, if there's an error, if something's not coming back correctly, you can go into your smaller sub-agent to correct that error, rather than trying to work it out from a huge scale, changing something and then changing the whole functionality of that agent. So that's a little bit about how agents are constructed and what we look at. I also wanted to let you know, so if anyone's now like, oh my God, this seems enormous, there are some out-of-the-box agents that Microsoft have developed for you as well. So you can find, if your organization has turned them on, you can find some of these already sitting in the Copilot chat experience. So you may have seen recently that the analyst agent has rolled out, as well as researcher. These are really powerful tools that focus on either doing researcher, obviously diving into deep research about a particular topic. Analyst will do some deep data analysis on what you're asking it to do. We have our facilitator agent and our interpreter agents that sit within our Teams meetings. I love both of these. Facilitator will really help manage the effectiveness of your meeting, and the interpreter allows you to listen to the person in your native language, and it even changes and reflects the person's tone and the way in which they speak in the new language. One of the consultants in our team actually did a 12-hour training session with a Korean, I think, presenter, and translated all of that into English for him. And he said it was absolutely splendid. He knew exactly what was going on for that whole 12 hours of the session. So these are amazing agents. We have our project manager agent that sits within Planner as well. And then with these, there are some that will need to be configured by in the back end as well. So things like the self-service agent to make sure they're going through to the right data sources, as well as the sales agents. But they are there and available for you if you want to start exploring the power of agents without having to set them up. What we want to kind of talk about next is get a bit hands-on with it. So Ben, last week, for those that joined us, we talked a little bit about the way in which we implement Copilot. Ben, I'll hand over to you if you want to kind of talk through methodology here.
Yep, excellent. So we've looked at the different types of agents, right? So we have our retrieval agents all the way through our autonomous agents. We've looked at the tooling that we could use, but what does it actually look like in the context of an organization? So what we want to do today is run through a bit of a scenario where we have a business process, and then we're going to look at how we can evolve the use of agents to address that process. So for agents, it's very much a maturity approach, a little bit like Copilot. Like, you can get started with something really basic and get some results, but as you mature, as you improve the skills that you have in-house, you might improve the governance that you also have. You'll also be able to get more benefits. So at a walk stage, so we've just got our agents, we might look at using an agent to help with an existing workflow. We're not trying to replace anything right now. We're just getting that helper, that assistant that is really focused on a knowledge source or some content. So we'll do that. Then we'll look at run, where we add some extra features. So now that we're playing in this agentic world where we have this agent that can help us, what other things can we do to support us as an individual, so enhancing our work. So we're just adapting the way that we do that. Next, when we shift into that transformational space, we look at, how can this agent actually potentially start to replace some of the business processes that we have? Why do we have those business processes in the first place, and how can the agent support that? And then finally, look at source. So it might be a complete rethink of what we've been doing originally. Maybe there are other systems that we want to integrate with. Maybe we're thinking differently about the way we work as a team and why we have that process in place. So obviously we would want to wrap all of this up with good governance and change management. And it's worth noting, just like the difference between us as human beings being able to walk and run to flying and soaring, there is a bit of a leap in skill level and in governance requirements when you start looking at using agents to address business solutions. So we'll explain that as we go through it, and hopefully through this demo, you'll see the differences between the different between the experiences, and you can think about, where might we sit, or what might we need to do to adopt some of these processes or using agents. Okay, I'm going to take over the screen now, Rosemary. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So this is our slide that we were just on before, And I'm going to switch over to, actually, I'll just move on to the next slide. So let's just explain what's going on here. So you might have a situation where we have an HR person who's responsible for answering all the HR questions. Right now, the way it works is that we have a person that they've got an idea, they've got a question about their leave, and so they know their email as an individual in HR, and they're like, hey, can you tell me what leave entitlements are? The HR person receives that email, then they're like, okay, so they go off to SharePoint and they have to hunt for that information. They look up the leave policies, they read through the appropriate content, and then they come back to Outlook to draft that email, they write it up, send it off, and it's back to the user. This is the way it's been happening for years. But they're getting emails, several times a day, and the poor HR person, their inbox is always full, and they're feeling like they can't get ahead of their workload because they're responding to emails all the time. So how can we help solve for this? So one of the most important things is actually mapping out what your business process is and looking for opportunities to bring an agent or Copilot experience into that. So what we might do is start here in SharePoint. So one of the issues is that we have to go through and look at all of our documents and figure out, which is the best way to respond. So we'll talk about this as our walk experience. And the first agent we're going to create isn't actually in the Copilot Studio Lite or Studio Full version. We're going to create an agent directly in SharePoint. So let's jump over to SharePoint and see what that looks like. So I'm going to pull up our SharePoint site here. And so this is the SharePoint site where we have our policies. And so the person would have to come in here and they have to hunt for their policies. So definitely don't want to go to draft policies, but we can see inside our current policies, we have all of these documents here. So I'll just go back a step. And we want to say, all right, maybe instead of me having to search through all these documents, I want to create an agent. So when I come into SharePoint, I can just ask a question of the agent, hey, can you tell me what the leave policies are? And that agent can search this specific folder with those files. So it's very simple. All we need to do is click on the folder here, go to the More Options menu, and click Create an Agent. And here we go. The agent is all ready to go. So before we get started, we might want to change what the agent does. So I'm going to click Edit. And you'll see here we have a very simple way to make changes to the agent. We don't need to know any code at all. This is what we would call a no-code experience. You can look at the current policies. We can change the logo if we wanted to. We can define the purpose. We can check the sources as well. So you can see here that the sources are already set to the current policies folder, which is great. We can add more if we wanted to, but we'll stick with this current policies folder. And then we can talk about the behavior. So the behavior has a nice little welcome message. We have some starter prompts. We might want to change those. So you can see them on the right-hand side here. So it might be, provide information about leave policies. These might be the hot questions that we get in HR, how do I request leave? And maybe, how do I see how much leave I have? So these might be the hot topics that everyone asks about AI, about HR. So as an HR person, I can quickly just click on one of these because I know that these are probably the questions that are going to be asked, or I can just ask a question directly in the box. Here you can see the instructions that it's quite simple. Provide accurate information about the content in the selected files and reply in a formal tone. Maybe we want to, hey, this is my agent, right, that we work with. Maybe I'll say a friendly tone instead. If we really wanted to, we could say talk like a pirate. And then we can test it. The policies for annual leave. So it's going to look at that SharePoint site or those the SharePoint folder and just look at the documents in there. And you can see here, we've changed the tone, so it's talking like a friendly pirate now. And you can see when it provides information, it references the documents that it's citing. So that's excellent. That's exactly what we want the agent to do. I can hit save and close. Great. And so whenever I come into my SharePoint site now, you'll see at the top here, there's the agent button, and the current policies agent is there, and I can just use it directly in SharePoint. So in seconds, minutes, we've created an agent in SharePoint that has a very specific document source to look at, and it has a way to respond back to me. What you'll notice as well is that just then it popped up that this is the file, the agent file that gets created, and I can edit that if I want to make any changes to the way it's responding. The other thing is that because I'm working in my HR team, anybody else who has edit access to this SharePoint site can also edit the agent if they need to make refinements as well, which is fantastic. All right.
Yeah, but I should extend on that. It does inherit the permissions that are in that SharePoint site. So if someone else outside of HR tried to use that agent and they didn't have permission to that folder, it wouldn't give them access to that agent. So all of those permissions are extended into that agent as well.
Yep, 100% correct. So it's all based on that SharePoint site. Okay, so as an HR person, I now have a quick summary of all the leave information here that I need to get. I could copy that out, or I could use that as a way to draft my email. I'd think about, right, these are the things I need to highlight, and I can go back to Outlook and send an email to someone or back to the staff member. So straight away, we're saving time by spending a few minutes to create our agent. All right, so that's our walk perspective. We're helping out in this area here. Now, we might go, hey, look, that's quite good. SharePoint agent is really helpful. But really what I want to do is fast track writing the email itself. And so what we might do is move to this run aspect. So thinking about how Microsoft 365 Copilot works, about how these agents work, I want to have an agent that sits inside my Outlook. I can not only search and find content in that SharePoint site, but I also want it to be able to respond to email or help me draft an email. So it won't respond directly, but it can help me draft the content for that email. So just a little helper. And I don't want to have to open up my SharePoint site. I want to stay in the flow of work. So staying in Outlook when I've received that email and get the agent to help me there. So what we're going to do now is take it that next step further. We're going to go into what we now call Copilot Studio Lite, and we access that through our Microsoft 365 Copilot app, or if we're using it in Teams or in or the chat experience in Outlook, we can also access it there. So let's switch over back to our browser, and we're going to go into the Microsoft 365 Copilot app. So that's at m365.cloud.microsoft. We have our search experience here. We have our chat experience here. And you can see in chat, I have several agents that we've already added. So Rosemary mentioned agents like researcher and analyst, and surveys are now available. So these are out-of-the-box agents that Microsoft already provide. But you can see down here, I can also create my own agent. So if you think about who this agent is for, these Copilot Studio Lite agents are really for you as an individual, or maybe you're just sharing it with a direct group of people that you're working with. So maybe your direct team. It's a bit like the OneDrive version of agents, right? It's for you as an individual. The feature set is lower, but you can do plenty with it still. So I'm going to hit create an agent. Now these agents build on top of the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience. So we're not having to define what model we're using. We're not having to dive into any of that orchestration. We don't have to worry about how it's responding. We're leveraging the work that's already in place with the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience. And so what we would say is that we are extending Copilot. So this is an extension of that existing experience. Now we can use templates here. So there are a bunch of templates that Microsoft already provide. We could also just use natural language to define what agent we want to create. So I could say, this is an agent that helps with HR questions based on our existing documentation, and can also help me draft emails. Okay. So Copilot Studio Lite will walk me through this process. It will look at my prompt and decide, this is the agent that Ben wants to create. It'll give me an agent interface here with a description and starter prompts. And it's now going to ask me, what is the, what tool should we call it? Is recommended HR assistant. Yep, that's fine. Let's go with that. That will update the HR assistant, or the agent name to HR assistant. And what it's doing behind the scenes is also crafting some instructions on how the agent should respond to the user as well. So right now, it's asking, what sort of tone, as an HR department, we want to keep it friendly, but professional. I get my spelling correct. And again, we won't see any changes on the right-hand side here, but I will switch into the configure section in a second so you can see what it's doing behind the scenes. Okay, so that's fine. It's asking for other things like, public websites for sources or any change to the tone. That's okay, we won't worry about that. Now, before we hit create, what I want to do is jump into configure. And configure will show me what's happening behind the scenes and what Copilot Studio Lite has been building out. So we have a name, we have a description, and we have these instructions. So these are just really basic instructions about what the agent should do, how it should respond, and just dot points here, which is fine. Okay, so concise, friendly, and easy to understand. And what we would need to do then is we would add the knowledge. So for these Copilot Studio Lite agents, because they build on top of the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience, it can access similar sorts of files. Again, it's all protected by the same restrictions in terms of your existing security settings and privacy settings. So I can come down here, you can see I can access files, I can access different sites, even my chats. If I wanted to, I could use chats from meetings or group chats as a knowledge source, or I can scroll down here and I can show you that you can also say, look online for you as part of your knowledge source. Look at all of my SharePoint sites, all of my Teams chats and all of my emails. These can all be knowledge sources. So this is why we would use these types of agents more as personal agents that you would use to help you in your workflow because you can access your content. But today, what we might do is choose to attach, actually we might just jump into a site. So I'm going to jump to sites. I know I have content in my pizza time site. Right, so it's either going to look at the whole site or, remember we had everything in that one folder. So instead I'm going to attach cloud files here. We will go to my pizza time policies. I'll go to current policies, which is the one that we wanted to select before, and I'll just choose the whole folder, hit select. Okay, so quite handy now. Let's test it out. What are the annual leave entitlements? That'll look through that folder. Here's a clear summary of what you're entitled to. Fantastic. So referencing that document, big tick. Let's hit create. We're happy with this agent. All right, so that's going to create the agent. When it's done, it'll show me some options in terms of who I can share this with agent with. So you have a link to the agent. Right now, it's only set for me and myself, so I'll leave it at that, and I'll click Go to Agent. It'll take a second to load that up. HR Assistant. There we go. And our agent is ready to go. We can start asking questions using those starter prompts that that Copilot Studio Lite built for us, but we could also edit these if we wanted to. Okay, awesome. Now, as we said, we don't want to do it here in chat. This is fine. We could open up chat, but we're not really saving any time versus going into SharePoint, right? So let's switch over to Outlook. So here I am in Outlook. I'm the person who has received an email from Emma. Emma's asking about leave policies. I can now jump into Copilot and I can select the navigation panel and I can choose all agents. Let's see if my HR agent, my new one, is there yet. If it's not, that's okay. I'll just use one of my existing ones. Oh no, there it is, HR Assistant, it's loaded. I can just say, can you draft a response to this email for me? Now again, this HR agent has been given knowledge source. Oh, whoops, what's happened here? Let's try it again. Draft an email. Rosemary and I were laughing at the, joking that the demo gods would make sure that they're with us today. All right, so it doesn't look like it's picking it up. Let me switch over to a different agent that we created before. This is one that I did test earlier today. All right, help me answer or respond to this email. Okay, it doesn't look like it's picking it up for me today. That's all right. We can show you some screenshots where it did work, but what should happen is that this can pick up what's happening here in this email, and it can draft that email. So it'll automatically read the SharePoint site, and it'll draft the email response. I'm just going to double check that I am definitely in work mode and not web mode. Yes, I am. That's all right. So it's not working for me today, but that's what it should do.
If it doesn't work like that, sometimes what you can do is pop your question in here anyway under that agent, so it'll follow that rule.
That's right.
You attach that email there, and it will respond to that email. So sometimes there are those things that happen with our agents, but by using that plus button and attaching that email, it'll give you the response that we're looking for.
Yeah, that's right. So you can either do it this way where you can tag the work document. So we could say pizza time leave policy. This is the email here itself. And we can then say, or you can copy and paste the text if you wanted to. And we can say, can you help me respond to this email? Let's see, let's hope that one does it. There we go, that's looking better. Okay, so you'll see that there are two skills in the agent that, that we've created here. It has a policy helper, which will search for the documents and find information. And there's also an email responder skill where it has the actual email here. So what I would do then, grab that, copy and paste that, check over it, make sure it's all good, and then send that off to the user. Okay, so in theory, that's the way that it should work. But remember, we do have this Copilot chat experience inside our application, so we can still tag the document in that. All right, so let's go back to our use case. So we've solved for this, we've saved an extra step. We don't have to leave Outlook. Now, the HR team might be thinking, hey, Emma, you've done a really good job. You've, or no, sorry, not Emma. Who was the helper? It was me. Ben, you've done a really good job creating this agent maybe we should think about actually giving our users an agent to interface with. Now, remember we created that agent in Copilot Studio Lite. And so maybe we don't necessarily want to give that, share that agent with users. We want to have a place that we can still extend the Copilot experience, but we want to manage that and be able to deploy that from our Copilot Studio full tool. So this is where we'd be in our fly section. So the concept would be the user talks to the agent grabs the information, goes back to the user. Now, we want to also add a fallback option. So if the agent can't find the information, it should offer the user an opportunity to send an email to HR, and HR can do the same process as it did before. So we want that fallback option when we're thinking about deploying this out to the organization. So let's have a look at how that one works. So I'm going to switch back out to our Copilot 365, our Microsoft 365 Copilot app, and we're going to click on the HR self-service buddy. Now, imagine we are now the end user. We're no longer the HR person, and we have a question. Can you tell me about my long service leave? Now, I know that in the policies, we don't actually have anything in there specifying information about long service leave. And so what we would want to do is allow the user to escalate that out to the HR team. So it says, yeah, thanks for your question about long service leave. Based on the contents of the policy document, we don't see anything in there. Would you like me to send an email to HR? And the user says, yes, please. And the agent will take the content of their response, of their question, put that into an email and send that off to HR, and it will tell the user, all done, I've sent an email on your behalf. So this is just a very basic concept, but the idea here is that we have a self-service agent that can look at HR policies, give responses, but also give that fallback, right? And so the tool we use to do this is inside Copilot Studio. So here we are in Copilot Studio Full. You can see on the left-hand side, we have some different options, and by default, we'll be looking at our agents. And you'll see here that I have some existing agents here, but you'll also notice that Copilot itself is technically an agent. And this is the one that we want to add information to, we want to build on top of it. So rather than clicking new agent and creating a custom agent, we're just going to extend the existing Copilot for Microsoft 365 experience. And you can see here when I do that, I'll click on see all, and you can see all of the different agents that I've created in the past that build on top of Copilot. So we're giving additional skills to Copilot, or we're creating an agent that can leverage that. So this is the HR self-service agent. The interface looks very similar to our agent, to our Copilot Studio Lite experience, but I've also now given it a new tool. So this is what's different. I can give this type of agent a tool which can send an email. So there are lots of different tools, lots of different connectors that you can use from different applications. So you can connect it to Teams, Dataverse, Excel. There are third-party applications. So there are thousands of connectors or tools that you can access through here. You can even create custom prompts. The tool that we've created is this send an email connector.
We'll just jump in there too, Ben, and just say when you are looking at those connectors, for connectors that sit outside of the 365 tool set, you do need to set those up in the admin center. So the 365 admin will have control over whether they are created and the permissions that are set on there, everything from how you authenticate in. So Pierre asked a question before about can you log into another app with our agents? You'd need to set up the connector for that and use and have the authentication set up to be able to use that. So if you do have logins for those other apps, using the tools here and setting that up would be where you do it, but it'd need to be set up in the back end first.
That's right. And as soon as you're in Copilot Studio, you're thinking about how are we deploying things? We're thinking about app lifecycle management. With who owns this? Who's going to be responsible for it? If we're creating something that's going to be used as part of our BAU, we need to make sure we put that rigor of governance around it. Yep. And that also includes understanding that when we have these external connectors, not only can we get data from those connectors, but data might go out. And so we need to make sure that we approve any of those connectors that are available and make sure we know who's going to be using them. Okay, so for example, we have this tool here and we're just using an internal connector which goes to Office, goes to Outlook. We have to make sure that we specify things like our inputs, our variables here, where we're saying, we've specified what the email address is, and then we're saying to the agent, hey, look, you can decide what the subject of this email is, and you can also decide on what the body of the email is based on the user's response. You can grab that. If you want to have a look at, we'll show that one in the next one. Actually, I could probably show it now. In the inbox, I'll show you that this email is what was created. It says it's been sent on behalf of the user, who's Ben, and then it shows this is what they were asking about in terms of the policy, and it says, what are the relevant information for long service leave. So that email gets sent. All right. So this one, all we're doing is adding an extra tool, but now we can put it in Studio, which makes it easier to deploy across the organization. All right. Now, one last one. Let's think about what would happen if we can rethink or redefine the way that we work. So maybe we want to get rid of this whole thing with the email. Maybe that's not critical. HR want to now triage emails. Rather than all the emails going to different people in HR, they want to use a SharePoint list to manage their tickets. So now we need to build out a ticketing system. Can the user send an email to or send a request to create a ticket? Not only does it mean that the user can then, or the HR staff can look at the ticketing, but the user might be able to get information about the tickets that they've created and see what they look like too. And so now we're redefining, rethinking the way that we work as an organization. Again, we'll do this in Copilot Studio, but instead of building on top of the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience, we're going to create a custom agent. So it's up to us to manage the whole thing. All right, so let's go to that next level. So this time, we would go to, let's actually go back to this one. We would hit create. We create a new agent. And we can describe it and configure it and start it from scratch. We won't do that today. We don't have time in the next 5-10 minutes. Let's go to one that we prepared earlier, which is this one here, the HR self-service agent. Now, what you'll notice here are a few more things that we can do here. So imagine we hit that create button, we hit the configure button, we would be here. We have the name, we have the description, but now we can have a choice between classic orchestration, where we specify really structured workflows for the user, or we can say, hey, you as the agent, you can orchestrate, you can decide what tools you use, what knowledge you use, what topics you reference, you decide. So we turn that on. You can see here that we also have the GPT-4o model, which is the default. As improvements are made, GPT-5 will be available. If you have an environment which has early access turned on, you can choose GPT-5, but GPT-4 is the default one. So you have that flexibility now. And now you have also additional analytics that you can tap into for your agent to see its usage. You can see the instructions here. We have our knowledge. We have our tools. Now, a couple of other things here that we can mention. You can have autonomous triggers. So maybe you could have an agent that activates when that SharePoint list gets updated. The user doesn't need to interact with it. It can automatically do it by itself. Maybe there are other agents, so whether it's a sub-agent or whether it's a separate agent completely, you can have this agent talk to those agents. So it's quite exciting. And then we have topics. Now, topics are just, again, structured workflows that the agent might send the user down. So there are some default ones that are there, but we can edit those as needed. And we have some suggested prompts. What's important here is that we now have these extra tools. So we have a get items tool, which if you've used Power Automate before, this one will look for a SharePoint site and we have to specify it. So we would need to set this up, set this SharePoint site up, hit the list, hit the query, and then that can provide the user back with the tickets that they have available. And then we also have, let me go back into the tool here, sorry, the agent. We also have this other tool here, which is called Create HR Ticket. Now, this one's slightly different. It isn't just a connector that goes into one system. It's a connector, it's actually what we call a flow. So if I click on Create HR Ticket, we'll look at what's happening behind the scenes of this flow. So again, if you're familiar with, if you're familiar with Power Automate, it's essentially or very similar to a Power Automate flow. Now, when it calls this flow, it needs to send some information into it. So we're sending in these inputs, so a ticket title, description, the user details, and their email. So this is what previously it just got sent off to the email address. But we're grabbing these inputs, sending it into a flow, and let's have a look at what that flow looks like. So to create the HR ticket flow does a few things. I'll go to the designer. So here we design the flow. So the agent calls this flow and it will expect to receive these inputs. That's what we just showed you just before. Now what happens? It goes to the SharePoint site, it looks at the list, and then it will fill out the details for a new ticket for us. Fantastic, tick the box there. It will also send an email to the user to say, hey, look, I've created this item for you, ready to go. So the user knows that that ticket has been created. And then it says back to the agent, all done, we've completed that task. All right. Okay, so as you can see, we can create these automated flows. So we don't have to tell it to create the ticket. We don't have to create that or particularly tell it to respond back to the user. It's already built into that flow. The instructions in there on how to use these tools. So we're saying this is how you use the get tickets tool. Here's how you use the create user or when to use the create user ticket flow. And we'll see what that looks like. So as a user, let's test it out. Can you tell me about personal leave? All right, on the left-hand side, you'll see what's happening behind the scenes. So this is mapping out and showing you how it's accessing the knowledge. And it says, look, these are the personal leave. I can say, you know, my plants are sick. Can I use personal leave for that? And it should say, no. Unfortunately, plants don't count. All right, so if I say I consider my plants family, the agent will say, maybe we should escalate this. Okay, so it's saying, no, definitely not. Okay, I want to escalate to HR. Okay, so it says the title for the ticket should be my plants are sick. And the description should be, I'd like to use personal leave. So you can see that. Sorry, I did make a change to one of my connections, but again, the demo guides, maybe I'll try and show you the demo in the actual agent.
Well, Ben, I'm just conscious we've got 5 minutes left.
Oh, yes. Okay.
As much as you're trying to convince the agent to give you leave to plan, the manager telling you you're not going to get it anyway.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
So
sorry, Ben.
No, I'll show you where this would look, or where this appears. So it would appear in the list. This is the list for the SharePoint side. So you can see here, this is the unassigned. This is the demo that I tried just before this one that worked. It shows me what the information is about my sick plants. So that's essentially the flow there, where we've changed the way we work using these agents. We've just scratched the surface though. So we just want to show you the concepts of what's possible in the full version of Copilot Studio. All right. All done, Rosemary. I'll hand back to you.
Fantastic. I was just going to say a couple of tips that we've kind of experienced as we've gone through and built agents. Now, agents are a really new tool. Really, they kind of launched onto the scene at the beginning of this year and have been continually evolving, and will continue to evolve over time with the capabilities that they're able to do that are built in naturally. But Ben, a couple of things that clients have asked me is about, well, how do I make sure it's accurate and Copilot's not kind of just coming up with with an answer because that's what it thinks it needs to do. Have you got some pointers on that?
Yeah, definitely. So when we think about those knowledge sources in Copilot Studio, there's a few different ways you can do it. So there'll be toggles and options for you to say, hey, don't use general knowledge. The knowledge that you've been trained on, you can ask Copilot to avoid using that. You can also put it in the instructions as well. So you can say things like, don't make assumptions, ask clarifying questions, and avoid certain topics. So what we'll also find is that as the newer models improve, they're getting better at trying to reduce hallucinations, essentially. So if the agent doesn't know, it can say that it doesn't know. But definitely using good knowledge sources, turning off that general knowledge source, and then improving your instructions to be really clear and specific about the information that it's referencing and how it cites that information is critical to reducing those hallucinations.
And also, you're seeing Ben testing in both of those platforms, in the Lite and full Copilot Studio. So do use that testing option to understand how your agent is working as well. We do have some other questions that have come in, mainly around the cost and sharing of agents. This is an interesting question. So if your staff have Copilot 365 Copilot licenses, they can use the agents that you share. There is then no additional cost. Unless you've gone into some of the advanced capabilities, then there is a cost, but that cost structure is being updated at the moment. For your non-licensed users, there will be what we call a consumption cost to use any agents that are grounded in anything other than a web source. Those need to be set up in the Power Platform to give access to that agent to a broader community. And as an organization, you can set a limit of messages on that agent as well. So if you're not sure whether Billy in the mail room is going to sit there and chat to the agent all day and you're going to get an enormous bill from that, you can set a limit on that, and you can monitor the consumption of that agent, particularly in the beginning when you release them, to make sure that you understand the usage of that agent. So yes, they do incur a cost, but depending on how that structure within your organization and your licensing structure works. So I hope that answers those questions that people have popped in. Got a good question there from Sayed. Who do we contact if you want a further conversation? Ben, do you want to move it along to our contact details? That's a brilliant question there. There we go. So there are our contact details. We would love to chat to any of you about Copilot, Copilot 365, Copilot Chat and agents, and how we have successfully deployed them and how we can support you in your Copilot journey. It is a tool that's continuing to evolve, and certainly one that we love working in and supporting organizations in their journey as well. we've come right to time. I think, Mel, have we captured all of the questions there?
Oh, we have. There was probably one more quick one from Pierre about, can we give the agent permission to log into external sites as ourselves to retrieve the data?
Yeah, that's the one where I answered. You'd need to set that up within Copilot Studio, set up your connector with the authentication instructions there, and then you can use that agent with your it's like an SSO access.
All right, perfect. Well, then I think we're covered. I'll just add that I think Troy's looking forward to pizza for lunch, and Pierre definitely said this blows his mind. So very cool. Awesome. So yes, thank you, everyone. I will send a note out with a copy of the recording and the slides to you after, also with some contact details. Also, please note, Microsoft may send you a survey to complete. We would love you to fill this in and send that back, and definitely appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one next week on security and compliance. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.